Hi everybody, I thought I'd share with you a book that we've been reading this week, which is a really topical book. It's called Stations 11, and it's basically a book about how a pandemic goes through Canada and America and sort of the aftermath of the pandemic. So I'm going to read you from the opening chapter of the book. The king stood in a pool of blue light, unmoored. This was Act 4 of King Lear, a winter night at the Elgin Theatre in Toronto. Earlier in the evening, 3 little girls had played a clapping game on stage as the audience entered. Childhood versions of Lear's daughters, and now they'd returned as hallucinations in the mad scene. The king stumbled and reached for them as they flitted here and there in the shadows. His name was Arthur Leander. He was 51 years old, and there were flowers in his hair. "Dost thou know me?" the actor playing Gloucester asked. "I remember thine eyes well enough," Arthur said, distracted by the childhood version of Cordelia. And this was when it happened. There was a change in his face. He stumbled. He reached for a column but misjudged the distance and struck it hard with the side of his hand. "Down from the waist they are centaurs," he said. And not only was this the wrong line, but the line was wheezy, his voice barely audible. He cradled his hand to his chest like a broken bird. The actor portraying Edgar was watching him closely. It was still possible at that moment that Arthur was acting, but in the first row of the orchestra section, a man was rising from his seat. He'd been trained to be a paramedic. The man's girlfriend tugged at his sleeve, hissed, "Jeevan, what are you doing?" And Jeevan himself wasn't sure at first, the rows behind him murmuring for him to sit. An usher was moving towards him. Snow began to fall over the stage. "Wren goes to it," Arthur whispered, and Jeevan, who knew the play very well, realised that the actor had skipped back 12 lines. "The wren." "Sir," the usher said, "would you please—" But Arthur Leander was running out of time. He swayed, his eyes unfocused, and it was obvious to Jeevan that he wasn't Lear anymore. Jeevan pushed the usher aside and made a dash for the steps leading up to the stage. But a second usher was jogging down the aisle, which forced Jeevan to throw himself to the stage without the benefit of stairs. It was higher than he'd thought, and he had to kick the first usher, who'd grasped hold of his sleeve. The snow was plastic, Jeevan noted peripherally, little bits of translucent plastic clinging to his jacket and brushing against his skin. Edgar and Gloucester were distracted by the commotion, neither of them looking at Arthur, who was leaning on a plywood column, staring vacantly. I'll leave it there for you to work out actually what happens to Arthur and what happens at the end of the pandemic. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.